Welcome. Welcome back to my channel Conquer the Fear. You know, Spring Boot application starts very quickly, but have you ever stopped to ask why? Do you know what is really happening when you hit the run in the Spring Boot application? Why does Spring Boot start so quickly? I know Spring Boot is very fast, but what is happening actually under the hood? Have you ever wondered? What is happening behind the scenes when you launch the Spring Boot application? Want to know how Spring Boot really gets started? If all the above answers are yes, in this video we are going to clarify your doubts and share you the details how it is going to work internally and how this magic happens. So let's break down the run method and the magic behind it. So without wasting our time, let's jump into the video and watch the video till the end. Now we would like to introduce what exactly the Spring Boot run method is about. It is going to be a starting point of your application. So your application starts from here. So it is part of the Spring Boot application class and it is used for launching the application. Now what is happening behind the scene? This method is going to trigger multiple actions. That is going to be a configuration, initialization, prepare the application to run, right? It is not just a simple method call, but it is going to do a lot of thing in the background, and that's what we are going to cover this in this video. Now Spring Boot application, when we start to bootstrap, right, it is going to run your application, and it is not going to simply start by your Java application, but it is going to start a fully configured Spring Boot application context. Now this is responsible for bootstrapping the entire process. Okay, so it's not only that, but it is going to start everything. So as we already discussed, the run method is responsible for starting the entire process. Now we'll look into the key steps, right? Key steps involved. Okay. Now the first one is going to prepare the environment. Okay. So it is going to set up the combination of command line arguments and property files and the default setting. After that, it is going to create the application context. And if you see in the run method, it is going to initialize your Spring Boot application, and also it is going to create your application context, which is going to be either generic web application context or annotated config application context that is used for web application. Now this is going to be a central interface. Okay, and like used for Spring Beans and other components. Now when you are loading the beans, right, it is going to contain, it is going to scan and it is going to initialize those beans on the application configuration and whatever it is going to find in the class path. Okay, that's what it is going to do. Now let's discuss about the core component, what is exactly the run method is going to, when it is going to execute, right? So if you see, like, it is going to delegate the several other components, right? Which is going to perform some special task when it is going to be in the startup sequence. Now the very first thing is that it is going to be the application Spring Boot application, that is Spring application class. Now this class is used for bootstrapping purpose, and it is going to run your Spring Boot application. Okay, so there is a run method inside the Spring application. Now the very first thing is that it is going to initialize the Spring environment. Second is going to create the application context. Third, it is going to configure your auto configuration, and then it is going to register the listeners for all your lifecycle events. Okay, that's the first point. Now secondly, if you see what is happening in the application context. Okay, now in application context, it is going to it's a container basically for all the beans and all the the services that are need for the application to execute. Now this is going to be a context that is either going to be created by annotation, that is application context, that is used for standard application, or it is going to be a generic web application context which is used for the web applications. Okay, now context is initialized with the bean definition and all the components required for the execution of the application. Okay, that's about the application context. Now when it comes to bean definition and auto configuration, now this is going to be the auto configuration when we discuss about it, right? So it is going to be based on the application environment, the class path. So Spring Boot will automatically configure your different components, such as, like, you have data source, you have security, you have any other things, right, which is going to be automatically configured there. Now, auto configuration of classes are loaded using the annotation, that is at the rate enable auto configuration, and it is going to register your beans automatically whenever it is needed. Okay, and we'll discuss on the important listener now. So when it comes to important listeners, right? So and the events when you're starting your application process, right? So the run method is going to execute. It is going to trigger several lifecycle method and events, right? Like, you have some custom behavior which at the application start you want. Now the very first thing is that application listener, when we are talking about, there are different of them. One is application prepared event. Now this is created when the application context is created, but the beans have not been loaded yet. Now, okay, it's in the process. Now application started event. This is I mean, the application context has been loaded basically, and the bean are now initialized here. But when it comes to application ready event, okay, now this application context is fully initialized. Okay, our application is fully initialized, and the spring context is ready to for the business basically. Now there are some application failed event as well. Like, let's say the event is fired, and when the application startup fails due to some application errors, right, then this application event occurs. So these events, which is going to allow the developers to, in various phases of the Spring Boot application, and add some custom behavior or logins, right, that is mainly used. Now we are going to discuss about the roles. Okay, what exactly the Spring Boot application run method is going to do. Now let's break it down into the actual, the application class. Exactly, the we have a run method over there, and what it actually is. So the very first thing is that the primary source, right, this is going to be the main class, the at the rate Spring Boot application. Or you have some let's say you have not defined at the rate Spring application, but you have defined at the rate enable configuration. It is going to provide an entry point for the Spring Boot to begin to scan the class path, and start the application for the setup. Now under that, it is going to detect the web application type, and then it's going to run, like, the application is, web application. It is going to call the detect web application type method. There is a method. So this will also decide if your application is going to be an embedded servers, like, Tomcat, or it is going to be a Jetty, right? So it is going to decide over here, right? After that, then it is going to run the method, that is application, that is ultimately it is going to delegate your execution to another run method that is inside your Spring application class, right? Now from your main application class run method to the Spring application class method. Now in this process, there is we are going to, discuss or outline all these steps, like, the setup environments, there initializing context, and everything is going to happen over here. Okay. Now, when it comes to Spring Boot application auto configuration, now this is one of the most important feature of Spring Boot, because auto configuration is going to be a mechanism where it is going to attempt automatically to configure all your application based on the available class paths, external properties. So it is going to reduce the need for your manual setup, which you used to do in the Spring framework, right? So you have at the rate enable configuration annotation, which is going to enable your configuration, flawless. Second, it is going to execute your run method, which is automatically configuring your beans. That is, let's say you have, in the class by data source, JPA and basic components, it's going to configure that. Okay. Now we are talking about the profiles. Okay, so and the configuration. So this is going to allow to define certain profiles. Let's say what is your active profile for your application. Now it is because profiles are used when you want some different configuration for your different environments, right? Whether it's your development, testing, or production, or features, whatever environment. Because this run method will have equipped with this particular profile via the command line argument, or either using the environment variable. It is going to load some profile specific configuration, that so that, the right set of beans, the right set of, application configuration, and the profile is active over there. Okay. That's the benefit. Now internally, when you go right, the thread management and the synchronization process, right, it is going to ensure your application is start up very quickly, okay, because application context and the beans are loaded in parallel. It is going to make use of the multi-threading environment to start up your process very fast, okay. So if you are using any asynchronous application in your application, this also will be initialized at this particular startup phase only, okay. So that's the benefit over here. Now when it comes to the application run method, right, I mean after the life cycle methods, I will say after the run method. Now this is going to method going to completely initialize and run, right, ready to process your incoming request over here. So you have a main method over here. This is going to be released after your application is fully up and running, okay. So if there is a web servers like Tomcat, it is going to run in the background automatically, awaiting it is going to incoming request that is coming from the http request. Now it is going to gracefully shut down as well, okay. Now it is going to handle your application context is closed properly. It is also ensuring all the beans are properly cleaned up, okay, and there is any outstanding request that are just yet to be completed, right. That is all things which is going to be handled as a life cycle method over here. Now uh, at the behind the scene, what is exactly happening as a part of the performance optimization. Now when you have a profiling tools, right, like which is going to identify and optimize your startup times, like spring boot actuator is there. There is a dev tool that is going to enhance your development when the developer is going to use it, right. It's going to feedback. Apart from that, there is a lazy initialization. By default, spring is going to eagerly load your beans, right. But when you want to handle it, let's say there is a high object is going to be created, right. So we can lazy initialize that, so that that is going to defer your bean creation until you actually needed it, okay. And then your application startup performance definitely is going to measure your and optimize your application at the startup process. So developer can see which bin is or the components are consuming so much of memory or time, etc., and how you can optimize it. This all information can be done over here with the spring boot optimization case. Now let's jump into the actual practical code. So I'm not going to go into the uh, spring boot application. So I will be downloading one spring boot application. I'm going to run and show you how this particular app, whatever we have discussed, right, I will show you each method where exactly this particular method will flow from, right from run method till the other methods which is going to be in the flow, okay. So let's begin. So we are checking on the application. Right now this application, if you see, this is a spring boot application. Now this is the main method over here, application over here, class, okay. Now if you see, this is the annotation over here, okay. And if you see, this has got a run method which is going to be called up over here. So this method itself starts from the main method over here, and then there is a spring boot application dot run method. Now this is where everything starts off, okay. So automatically it is going to look for your classes annotations, like the at the rate spring boot application, and this is going to be an entry point, okay. So that is the first thing. Second, now if you see, there is a application dot run method over here, right. Now if you go underneath this, right, so this is called up from the main thing, right. So this is going to initiate your application setup process, like it is going to create your application instance, and it is going to invoke your run method over here, right. So we have in this method, what it is going to do is going to initialize your application context. It is going to set up your environment variable. It is going to start the auto configuration process, and eventually it is going to start your web server, that is if it is an Tomcat or something else, right. So that's where it is going to be. Now there is a constructor in the spring boot application, right. If you see, right, yeah. So now if you see here, right, this is the primary source we are talking about. So this is going to be the constructor that is going to set up your primary source, the main configuration classes, and it is going to determine the type of a application, whether it is an web based application or it is a non web based application, and this is going to be decided over here. Okay. Now ultimately it is going to call the prepare environment method over here. Okay. Now if you go to the prepare environment method over here. Okay. Now this is going to be ultimately uh, it is going to prepare the environments of your application, which is going to be the configuration properties, your command line arguments, your active profiles, and everything that is will be taken care in this particular things. Okay. Now if you see, there is an next thing is creating the application context now. Okay. So now if you see, in this, under this, is going to be created a application context. Now we'll go to that particular location. Okay. Under this application, create application context. Now in this, if you see, this is going to be creating. So now whether your application is web application or not, it is going to create your annotated configuration application context, or it is going to be a generic web application context. So this is going to hold that information, all the beans and the application environment over here. Okay. Now there is a now under from the run method, that is going to be called the refresh method. Okay. Now this particular refresh method is going to be, right, we're going to refresh that particular thing. So now this method is responsible for fully initializing your Spring Boot application context. So it will load all the beans in the context. It is going to dependency injection and perform some bean initialization, etc. over here. Okay. Now under the hood, right, there is a class called Spring Boot application factories loader. Okay. Now under this, there is a method called there will be a method called load. Okay. So if you see all these variations over here, so there is a method which is going to load. Now in this particular is going to scan your meta inf spring, that is the file called spring dot factories. So it is going to load, and it is going to automatically configure a class which is going to provide automatic configuration for various Spring Boot features, like you have data source, web servers, etc. Right. And the left side, if you see, I've already opened this particular thing, right? So if you see under this Spring Boot, if you are going to see all those particular details over here. Okay. I hope this is clear to you. Now then comes a publish application event. Okay. Now whether based on your generic application context or your annotation context, it is going to call that particular method. So this is going to fire up your events, like life cycle example, application ready event we already discussed, right? So this is going to signal the application is fully initialized now and ready to handle your request. Okay. That's where it is going to take care of these things. Now under the Spring Boot application, there is a start web server method. Okay. Which is going to be used up. So under this, now this application is a web application. It is going to run and initialize, and it is going to be embedded server like Tomcat and other things. It is going to handle your HTTP request. Now ultimately, as we already discussed, there are some application ready events, etc. These all things will be taken care. Okay. So starting from the main method, it going to be from the as we already discussed, from the main method, it is going to call the application class run method, and then there are some a constructor which is called, and then there are some prepare events, right? Create application context, it is going to refresh your all and load the beans. Then comes Spring Factories load beans, so it is going to load your auto configuration. Then there are some, it is going to fire some lifecycle events like application prepare event and another this. And then comes your application startup of your web server. So it is going to initialize and start your embedded server over there. And then comes your publish event. So it is again going to fire some events, right? Which is going to signal that the application is ready to serve your request. Okay. So I think I have explained in depth, in details of, like what exactly the Spring Boot run method does. Okay. And how it is going to run in the debug mode as well. Okay. So I hope I have explained you in details. And if this video was very helpful, please share it with the needy people, and also don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon.